Space Live. I'm your host, the Penny Finley. We got a great show today. You guys are going to be talking about my favorite topic, which is politics. I know they always tell you there's two things you don't talk about, religion and politics. Well, we're going to get down and dirty and talk some politics today. I got some amazing gentlemen with me for the best minds that B.L.A.C. Space had to offer. I'm going to introduce in no particular order. Joining me today is good old Mr. Rock Soldier. He's the co-chairman of IYA, which stands for the International Association of Young Adults. Good evening to you, Rock.
Good evening.
Also with me is George Middleton, mental health counselor and author of B.L.A.C.K, which stands for Beliefs Limiting Authentic Cultural Knowledge, addressing the connection between mental health and the race construct. And it's also available on Amazon. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Penny.
And last but certainly not least is the William Muldrow, aka Mojo. He's from Tallahassee, Florida. He's a fellow Floridian in the house, graduate of the Florida State University as well as Flagler University. Good evening, Mr. Mojo.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, we're going to talk about a conversation that really rubs people the wrong way, depending upon your opinions. We're going to talk about politics. My background is I'm a former lobbyist. I've been in politics. There's not much I have not seen or heard. There's not many levels of government I've not worked for or with. I've seen it all, done it all, and met many candidates, both local and national. I want to start the conversation talking about partisan politics and the role that Blacks play in partisan politics. We certainly know that, 95% of us will vote, we vote Democrat. Of course, we can trace that back to the Lyndon Johnson days, although it started happening under FDR. But we tend to vote one particular party. Pros and cons to voting one party. We're going to start with you, George.
You gonna start with who?
Start with you, George.
Pros and cons about allegiance to one party.
Yes.
I think that is one of our strategical errors because we're doing a bounce back from the awareness that the Democrat Party has. We've had the longest relationship with, but we really haven't gotten a whole lot of bang for our buck. So now there's this trend of thought that get off the plantation and let's go all the way over to the other side and claim allegiance to the Conservative Party because they are supposed to quote unquote align more resonating with our interests as a demographic. And that's typical human behavior. When one thing doesn't work, we go all the way to the other extreme thinking that the exact opposite will work. And then at some point, when we see that both ends of the extreme don't work, we finally eventually come back to the middle and have a more pragmatic approach. Right now, we are on the bounce back from the Democratic plantation. Everybody's, I think I shared this before in the previous one, to bite off of Killer Mike, everybody is right now trying to show who's got the best master rather than us mastering our own issues and our own quality of life structure.
Mojo, he said that we should show that we are master of our own quality of life and structure. How will we grasp that? What would that look like, Mojo?
Well, the only way you can actually do that would be post-segregation. Post-Civil War, during segregation, because they gave the Negro the right to vote, then they took it away. Then we had suffrage because the Negro didn't vote for the right person. So they're giving you the tools to let them to teach us what we need to do for them. If we are not working on the behalf of what Massa wanted, then we don't have that right. So if it's not our community, our things, and our goals specifically, where we don't have to vote for everything as a whole for society, we just voting for what Massa want anyway.
That's it.
Go ahead, George. You wanted to?
I agree. He's saying right on point. We're just doing the contemporary version of step and fetch it.
Rock. Contemporary. I see you kind of got a chuckle out of that, Rock.
Yeah.
Contemporary version.
I love y'all.
Do you agree with that point, Rock? That we're just stepping and fetching?
Yes, I do agree. I agree. I think politics, like a lot of things, has become a monopoly, and monopolies are never good for a consumer in any area of people activities. It's not good with mobile carriers. It's not good with detergent, and it's not good with politics either. So we're at a disadvantage right from the gate because it's a duopoly. It's either primarily Republican or primarily Democratic. That puts us as the consumer or as the constituents at a disadvantage, and then we're even at a further disadvantage by being Africans in America who continue to vote for the Democrats. And we can see over several decades that hasn't been quite beneficial for us.
But a lot of cynics say you're choosing between the lesser of two evils, right? That's what cynics say.
Mm-hmm.
And some people would say, well, if the Republicans wanted us to vote for them, they would yield better candidates, or at least try to put forth leadership on some of our quote unquote Black issues. What are your thoughts on that, Mojo?
Well, one of the things that was most troubling, people were troubled a lot by a lot of the anomalies of the 2000 election. What troubled me the most was that white folk figured out they didn't need the Black vote, period, to win. That you could literally win without pandering, because the Republicans pander to Black people and the Democrats pander to Black people, and they all offer us things that we might not get. But once the first person figured out that you could run again, like the old days, on a pure racist, I don't care about Black folk ticket and win, we wasn't in the race no more. It didn't matter.
You said that Republicans pander to Blacks. I'm curious to know how, in what ways, because I don't think
ever met what's that woman, Candace Owens?
Candace Owens.
That's how they pander to Black folk.
So
they find a coon and they put the coon out there, and they hope some coons follow the other coon.
So you're saying, and we kind of George and I kind of hit on this the topic racial. There's a word for it. Racial showcasing. Yeah, racial showcasing, which they find this
racial showcasing.
They find this quote unquote.
Well, they believe that they don't believe in the intelligence of a Black person. So they believe that they can find one of us to lead the rest of us. And so if they can get one Black person to say, it's okay, Black folk, then we all gonna say, okay, well, that Negro said it's okay, so it's okay for me too. Because they condescend to a Black voter. I mean, even the Democrats do this. They do not respect you enough to talk to your actual issues, to your actual concerns or your actual points. They condescend to you, and then they find a Negro that is the middle ground in between, what they want to do and what they want you to do.
Well, we're not a worthy constituent for most politicians to speak to our issues. Very often, our issues are not organized. They're not, and they're also not backed by money or power.
I'm gonna hit on what you just said there when you say our issues aren't organized. I'm gonna disagree to an extent, but I want to address something that Mojo said a moment ago. He said that they pander to us, and I get that the Republicans or conservatives will choose a Black person. Obviously, when Obama was elected to office, the Republican National Convention then hired Mike Steele, to kind of counter Barack Obama to I guess in an attempt to kind of gain some Black support, but it's not effective. It doesn't really move the needle. I don't think there's a Republican candidate outside of Reagan that has gotten more than 10% of the Black vote in the last, in our lifetimes at least. But going back to what you said that we're not organized and we don't have the money. I think that we are. I think that we especially on a local level, we tend to get movements, going local. I kind of alluded to this in a previous show, talking about here in Florida after the whole Trayvon Martin situation. There's a lot of movement behind the mistreatment of blacks, and we got a prosecutor removed. We got a few laws changed. The Mercer Alexander case, which is hit the social media verse, if you will, repeated. We got her sentence changed because after we got the state attorney removed. So I think that, but the problem is Trayvon Martin's mom, who gathered all this national attention, got picked up to run for Congress.
We didn't get a state attorney removed, though. Okay, because we didn't get a state attorney removed. All right, because the attorney in the case, well, listen, the state attorney was Willie Meggs. Right. Willie Meggs retired by the 5-drop rule of the state of Florida. He didn't have no choice. Even as an elected official, he didn't have a choice, even while he was running. Pam Bondi was the assistant district attorney, and she couldn't win no more. We didn't remove her. Nobody cared about George Zimmerman. Nobody cared about Marshall Alexander. Pam Bondi did not play.
I'm speaking specifically to the Mercer Alexander case.
Yes, but Pam Bondi prosecuted that, and the reason that she would brother George?
Yes, sir.
Oh no, I thought that you were speaking. I'm saying that Pam Bondi. I have 2 friends that were right under Pam Bondi. It didn't have anything to do. We didn't get anything removed. All right. Black people and the black voice didn't have anything to do with what Willie Meggs decided in the state attorney's office. So
I'm talking about Corey. I'm talking about Angela Corey.
It still doesn't matter. The only thing that matters in those and what's odd is black people literally did vote for a different district attorney here in Florida, and he literally because he was actually on my radio show on Sunday for the 4th Estate, and he literally pandered again, and he sounded like he was a good deal. That he cared because he talked about there's so many black people are prosecuted for crimes that they didn't commit and profiling and all that stuff, and it didn't take him 1 month to be just like Willie Meggs.
Well, I was
the story of our lives.
I was speaking specifically to Angela Corey. Angela Corey did catch a lot of backlash for the sentencing of Mercer Alexander. She caught a lot of backlash for the handle of that case, and she did lose her neck.
Absolutely.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. But a lot of that pressure that was put on her locally. A lot of people don't understand that locally you can make a lot of change.
Absolutely.
The point that I was making is that a lot of that attention, a lot of the national attention that was drawn was a spinoff of the Trayvon Martin case, and the head of that entire movement was his mom. And now the feds have come in and they've convinced her to run for federal office. That was the point that I was making. We have a lot of power locally, but we don't utilize it. Whenever the feds see a great movement locally that gets national attention, they swoop in, steal the thunder, and then use it for their own power. How do we take that power back, George? How do we take, whenever we get a nice local movement going, how do we prevent the feds from coming in and just ruin it? Because as with all great movements, they go to Congress to die.
Well, I want to make the connection between what you said before you started this segment of the conversation, mm-hmm. and how Rock ended it before we moved on from it. You started off by the observation that we often play politics as the lesser of the two evils between conservatives and liberals. That is a mindset. And, I'm always approaching things from how we are looking at it. And when we look at things, when you say the words, and I'm not attributing this to you personally, but I'm saying when we say the words lesser of the two evils, that implies a platform or framework of morality. And oftentimes, as a demographic who is perceived as Black, we're playing a morality game, thinking that based on whether it is moral, whether it is good, whether it is just, that is what it takes to have a strong political platform. However, Rock ended it by saying very accurately, our issues are not organized, and more importantly, they're not backed by money. And we don't really understand or value the significance of that statement. But I'd like to give you just a couple of examples, or a prime example of what Rock is talking about. I researched a list of our current president's top donors, and there's an article, research article, talking about Trump's top donors. Where are they now? And I'll just run off a list of the donors real quick, and you can go into any one of them as you think necessary. But we've got donors to his organization: Renaissance Technologies, the Bernard Marcus Family Foundation, McMahon Ventures, G.H. Palmer Associates, Marvel Entertainment, B.L.A.C.K, Mount Air Corporation, Houston Texans, Cerebras Capital Management, Electro Impact, Steel Capital. Do any of these companies sound indigenous to our demographic?
No.
Now, here's the other thing, that these donors, they are putting in millions of dollars into his campaign. They have a laundry list of expectations from that. And then in addition to those laundry lists, they are often rewarded by having relatives or close friends awarded positions in the cabinet or positions as ambassadors, like this latest situation with Sandro.
They have been given them.
Right? And who's in trouble now with this whole Ukraine situation. But the point is regardless of whether you think it's a hoax, a setup, or fake news, or whatever that is, the game is played with organized money. Organized money. It is not about the lesser of the two evils. And until we start to understand that is the framework of politics, we will then focus more on getting off of the moral perspective and get onto the organized perspective, and not organized in response to, but a proactive organized approach, so that we're not asking our political representatives, what are you going to do for us? We are in control and have a position of accountability from them to do that. That's the game.
Right.
You want to chime in?
Me?
It looked like you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that after we have basically had a Supreme Court that has ruled that corporations are people and have rights, and you're dealing with the 1% money against, and one of the things that's interesting that we talked about money to run this. The thing that made them so afraid of Barack Obama's street campaign is because it was soft money, and soft money never made that much until Barack Obama. That people were giving to his campaign $1, $2, $5 at a time. And I was sitting here in Tallahassee, and I watched John McCain, I watched Kerry be terrified because the man still had $14 million left to spend, because they thought broke people couldn't contribute the way rich people could. And Barack Obama had generated so much money because he had generated so much inspiration that he did it by soft money, dollar at a time. We can't compete against the rich and the rich and the rich and the rich buying these campaigns. We will never win that game, ever. But we had a man that was literally funded by the people and funded by the poor, and ended up with more money than he could spend after he won the election. He had $14 million left, and they were broke. The rich folk were broke, and we should think about that.
Yeah, but candidates like Barack Obama come around once, if you're lucky, maybe twice in a lifetime, right? That inspire that kind of, commitment, that inspire that kind of, cooperation in our electoral system. So that's rare. So if there's no Barack Obama, how do we garner that amount of, first of all, capital? How do we garner that kind of capital?
The thing is, brother, what I'm saying, if you do not have that, then you're playing a game that was already set up for you to lose. These people are buying their political positions. They are not there by merit. They are not there by worth. They are not there because they're great orators or they have a history of education. Look at Donald Trump. He's the least educated, the least qualified person ever in life. And he is there by money and popularity. And if we play their game, anytime someone tells you to play the game their way, you're going to lose because they already set the rules. They've already set it up for you to lose. If you do not inspire a different type of game, you will absolutely lose their game every single time.
Right.
Brock, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing before you move on. I think it's also important for us to recognize that there's a distinct difference between a mobilization effort and an organized effort. And I agree with what you're saying on a local level. I wasn't in Florida, but just listening to your feedback, it sounds like there was some degree of organized activity taking place in Florida in order for some of those things, for people to be unseated and for other people to be put in place. But mobilization trumped organization. And during the run-up to elections, we keep hearing the word mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. And that's what's happening. Mobilization continues in our community, continues to trump organized movement. And there's a difference. We have lots of mobilizers. We have lots of people who are great at mobilizing people. We do not have a lot of people who are great at organizing people. And we can't keep confusing the difference or trying to merge the two. There's mobilization and there's organized activity. What we're seeing, in my opinion, is largely a result of mobilized movements, not organized movements.
But again, I think that even it's a lot easier to do on the local level. I'm going to switch things up a little bit. I want to go somewhere with this. I want to ask you three gentlemen, what do you believe are the top three issues in the Black community? I'm going to start with you, Rock.
Top three issues.
What's your top three?
In respect to local politics?
In respect to the Black community in general, generally speaking. It could be you feel nationally or locally. What do you think the top three issues are in the Black community?
Well, okay, based on what I often hear, education, economics, and politics. That's like the trifecta that most people talk about. Education, economics, and politics.
Okay. Same question, Mojo.
Access, and access.
Access to what?
Access to being able to get credit, to have a house, to have access to education, to have access to opportunities. Our access to opportunities is everything. That if your children, it is a proven fact that if your children's education is based on your education. If you didn't have access, they will have less access. And then the next generation will have less access. Things are generational. So the fact that we don't have access to the same loans, to have the same businesses, to buy homes and things that will appreciate instead of just renting stuff that you know, we are not putting our money into our own pockets and back into our own families, we don't have access to the money, to the systems, to own property, to live in a good district, to have education, to be in a better schools, to be in a place to improve the next generation.
So your top three is access to education.
Access and opportunity. Our problems are access, opportunity, and discrimination.
Okay, access, opportunity, discrimination. George, your top three.
In order of priority, the wealth gap, public safety, and the education gap.
So education was mentioned pretty much by everybody. And I would pretty much concur with you gentlemen on the same thing. When I mentioned earlier that a lot of our issues or a lot of our power stems locally. It lies locally, right? A lot of the issues, the education being the number one, can be addressed locally. The feds only contribute to public schools about 8% of the public school funding. The other 92% comes from states and local municipalities. So the feds, you could address the issue of education locally. Mojo, you know, here in Florida.
Well, the state on the state level is worse. All right. On the state level, it's actually worse because the same way they have, you know, that we see redlining and gerrymandering. If you look at the school districts, on the school districts, it's way worse because they have spent years creating these credential systems in which, you know, that they basically are playing Robin Hood. That the schools that already had too much, they give them a higher grade and then they give them more funds. The schools that don't, then they're giving funds based on the grade system they gave them. So the schools that don't have enough to make that grade get less funds every year.
Right.
And even with the charter schools.
We get that point, but my point is that because we're talking about political power here, we're talking about power, and I've said it many times that, you know, we have greater power locally, right? And
but it goes to when I said access and ownership. Well, the thing is, those school districts are based on the millage rate of how much you pay for your property.
But
well,
Mojo, you're getting off point. We're talking about power. I understand.
I'm talking about that's power. I don't want
to get into the intricacies of the issue in and of itself. All right. In order to address that issue, we don't need to elect a congressperson to address that issue. We don't need to elect a president to elect that issue. That issue is a local and state issue that we can have the power. Here in Florida, we just passed the law allowing felons the right to vote instead of that ridiculous system that we had prior.
And then they took it away.
Well, he's trying to delay, but you get what I'm saying. Locally is where the power is. We don't have to spend all of our time and energy and resources on federal candidate. George, in the beginning of the show, I was talking about the pros and cons of parties, and I pointed out the fact that we tend to vote one way. If we can't raise the money to sway, you know, to get that power and influence, doesn't our vote count for something? Can't we hold that vote ransom and account for something?
No. Look at the history. I mean, look at the statistics today. Even with our most recent quote unquote accomplishment of the first Black president, how far have we really come? Aren't we still having the same issues, the same arguments? Aren't we still fighting to keep the things that we fought to get that we thought were ours, but now it seems like everything is being repealed, taken away, or diluted? You know, you can't do anything from a moralistic framework in America's system of politics. You said something a minute ago that a candidate like President Obama comes around, you know, once in a lifetime. That ability to mobilize, I love that word, mobilize and inspire a group. That again, as affirming as that was for our demographic to have Obama in office, it's like a sugar high, because we got our therapeutic fix on seeing somebody that looked like us up there, but we got no meat on the bone after he left. And that is because both parties have figured out that we operate on emotions. That if the more you can empathize with us or rile us or get us angry, you have to keep us in an emotional state to mobilize us. When we're competing with other groups, that emotion is the last thing on their template. Values and morals are the last, even though they might verbally speak to them, that's the last thing on their template. The most important aspect on their template is economic control, income, and power, because everything else comes under subjection from there. And we don't do that. I agree with you, Penny, that the approach is local first. But here's the thing. We've got great minds here on this platform, and we've got great minds in this organization of Black Space Live. And in each of our individual networks, we're probably hanging around and networking with great minds and highly accomplished persons. The solution of how to get it, that's the easy part. I mean, you just repeat success, right? The formula for success is you find what's working and duplicate it. That's not the issue. The issue that I'm really focusing on is, why are we still talking about it in 2019? Why is it still an issue? Why is it still a discussion topic rather than an action item of something that is accomplished and done and on to the next one? And that's why I'm really, again, going back to the point of redundancy, to the mindset. It's not about what there is to do. We're smart enough to figure out the solution, but do we have the will? Do we have the belief that we can work together on a local level? Do we have the belief that we can pool our little nickels together, like we learned from the Obama campaign? That it doesn't take a whole lot. It just takes a collaboration of people to put their nickels together and align on one level. But we can't do that just in the emotion of the moment. That's got to be a regular, organized structure, not one of mobility, like Rock pointed out very accurately. We've got to set up structure, infrastructure, so that regardless of how inspirational or how uninspirational our political representatives are, the machine is working.
Right.
We don't have a machine.
Right.
And I feel like we will never get to that machine because we are so easily distracted. I think that whenever we get a groundswell of movement, we get distracted by simple stuff. With Barack Obama, we were so focused on who is, making racial caricatures of him instead of asking him to pass policy. I feel like locally, we turn our elected officials and those that we have given the power to, we turn them into celebrities and we don't ask them for anything. I've experienced this so many times. That's why I don't spend personally a lot of time focusing on the national elections, because I recognize the money interest there, and it's going to take time and organization and money to defeat those moneyed interests. There are two examples in recent times in which, local power was shown with simply the vote. The moneyed interests were not influential. Montgomery, Alabama just elected its first Black mayor. And then an African immigrant was elected in Helena, Montana. An African immigrant in Helena, Montana, a city that I think that's like 90% white, elected a Black African immigrant. Because if the infrastructure there locally, if it can be done locally, it can be done without all those distractions. Where the problem lies, and they're dealing with this in Helena because they're trying to figure out how it was done. The DNC's already began sending folks to Helena because they want to know how this was accomplished. Why? Because they want their piece of the pie. And that's the point that I'm trying to get to, is how do we get away from this national movement? The marathon of 26 miles is run step by step. How do we stop focusing on the end of the marathon and focus on that singular step? Mojo, looks like you want to chime in. You
are touching on the key, at least for me. What I've always noticed is one thing: everything is so cyclical. That we take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But no one really cares that much about the black vote, or for that matter, the black dollar, because, you know, we always have to come back to, you know, that we don't produce enough, we don't deal with enough, that we have to end up, you know, buying from the same people. You know, like no one boycotts Walmart type of thing. But in the 60s, one of the things that was, you know, propelled a lot of people into, like Shirley Chisholm in 1969, there wasn't money that did that. It was because so many people came together that they couldn't deal with they couldn't use the federal funds and the state funds in the cities and the counties, when all those black people in those cities and counties, they come together and say, well, we're not working no more, we're not doing this. And when it became that if we don't give them a candidate, if we do not stand behind these black candidates, then we can't even spend the money. If you are a unified front, things happen. The money is, you can never win that money battle. But when you are purely unified, when you purely have focus, when a whole community, DC has done this, Dallas has done this, Watts did this, but we are separated. We are not a unified people. And as long as they see that they can separate us and divide and conquer, well,
but
we divide it.
William, I'd like to just, you said it 2 times, and I just want to respectfully challenge that one premise that you're making. You say that we could never win the money battle. And I just want to take the time to remind everybody, we already know this, but we don't emotionally embrace it. As a demographic, we have the amount of wealth of the 4th largest country in the world.
I'm aware, now, but I'm also aware that what we gonna spend it on, what people gonna spend. He's talking about purely political, though. What share of the contributions of any person in the United States of America is 2%. So when you take that $13 billion that black folk will spend every year, how much realistically are they willing to spend towards political gains, towards social gains?
So let me speak to that.
Let him finish, Mojo. Let him finish his point.
So let me speak to that, because what you're saying is accurate, but that is in our present reality. What I'm speaking of is visionary, all right? Because this is what other people that are more effective in their politics are doing. And as long as we think in defeatist terms, and I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, I'm talking about us as a collective, then everything we attempt to do will be sabotaged, because we're mentally sabotaging our own efforts. And to believe, I'm just challenging us all not to believe that our money can't have as much influence as their money. When our money is a primary fuel for their engine. That's why they want us. It's not just for the vote. They want us to continue our spending practices and behavior. Now, when we decide to turn that around and do what Dr. Claude Anderson recommends, is get that 8 to 12 times dollar circulation in our community, we will end up reducing our level of dependence for them on a lot of infrastructure issues, such as employment, housing and loans, banking, education, because we will be in control of that from a financial aspect. When you do that, we then create more economically contributing individuals in our community that will go on and influence our politics and create a larger economic base. We have, that is true freedom. That's true freedom.
Absolutely.
That is true freedom.
Can I just chime
in? Go ahead, Rob.
And add something? In terms of what Penny was asking earlier about, well, how do we get there? Well, we have to, and not to sound like a broken record, but if we continue to look at these issues, and I could rattle off a long list, but I won't. Any of the issues that we're discussing, if we continue to look at these issues through the lens of brown and black skinned white people, we're going to continue to get the same results that we're getting. It's not just about power. It's not just about all of these things. It's also about the lens through which we're seeing these things. And we're seeing these things through the lens of codependent people. And we're seeing these things through the lens of a Eurocentric mindset.
Yes.
But we're talking about, I'm trying to address the issue that I have. It's one thing, like accountability. We always talk about accountability, right? But we don't hold our people accountable. It's like we're okay with just, oh, we got a black president elected, but we asked them for nothing. It's okay. We have this black mayor, but we've asked them for nothing. I want to give you guys an example, and I will reference this city a lot because I lived there for many years. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is not that big of a city. It's about 600,000 people, right? And it's a majority minority city. There's more black and brown folks than there are white people in that particular city. Half of the city council is black, but Milwaukee also ranks in the top three in police brutality issues and monies paid out with police brutality issues. They have one of the worst public education systems in the entire country, and they've consistently ranked as the most segregated city in the nation by many different studies, and the worst city in America for a black person. It ranks worse than some southern cities that are still sundown towns. Milwaukee does, and they have all this black leadership, but yet and still nothing changes. How do we get back from that? How do we get away from that? And it's kind of ironic because when it comes to elected official, we are fine writing them checks, local elected officials of color, writing them checks and casting them votes. We don't have that same mentality with black businesses, but we'll address that at a later time. How do we move from electing them to holding them accountable? How do we move toward that?
You don't.
Thank you, George.
Okay. I want to put this analogy out as an answer to, and I know it'd be much easier to directly answer the question, but I'm addressing mindset. Having that dynamic in the city is similar to a lottery winner who was broke before he won the money. What am I saying with that?
They're not used to it. They're not used to it.
So you can
They don't know what to do with it.
No, Drew, that's true too.
That's it.
Point, yeah.
They don't know what to do with it. It's like a dog chasing a car. If a dog ever caught a car, what he gonna do with the car?
I love it. I love
Good
it.
analogy, Mojo.
I love it. And so what I'm saying is, what I keep proposing is the least attractive, the least sexy, the least alluring aspect, because it's not emotionally based.
Right.
You know, you said it earlier, the new shiny obstacle, we get distracted. Oh. We are a demographic of distractions because we feel as long as we keep moving, it affords us two things. It affords us a false sense of accomplishment. The more activity, then you feel like I'm getting something done. And it also affords an ability to not have to look at your reality because you're moving too much. But there is a great motivative speaker that says about thinking, right? He says there's a difference between mental activity and thinking. It's not the same. Just because you have a lot of stuff going through your mind, it does not equate to thinking. Mm-hmm. There's a difference because thinking takes work. It takes energy. It takes concentration. It takes focus. And what's happening is we're waiting for our 40 acres and a mule, waiting for our reparations. We're waiting for a administrative political organization that looks like us. But when we get it, it'll be like my man said, the dog catching the car. And so we're going to end up going right back to our emotional comfort zone because we got all this, but we don't believe that we deserve it. Whatever the trauma that's been done with it to us, we haven't addressed the trauma that's affecting our thinking. So when you get something before you're ready for it, you end up wasting it.
And when we do think, we think like white people.
Rock, expound on that. Expound on
Go
that.
ahead, Rock.
It sounds it sounds kind of contradictory, and I'll tell you why. If we don't know what to do with it, and they do, how are we thinking like them? We don't know what to do with it. Expound on that.
How are we thinking like them?
Yeah. In what way?
We're thinking like them because we've been socialized to think like them. We're talking about schools and education and economics. I mean, I guess to keep it simple, if we're talking about economics, basically we're talking about capitalism, which is Eurocentric. If we're talking about if we're talking about education, most of us are talking about the so-called public school system, which again was Eurocentric in the way that it was founded. It is exactly European in the way that it is structured. Even the word kindergarten is German.
It is German.
Okay, the whole structure of the public school system is European completely. There's nothing African centered about the school system. So we think the way that we've been socialized to think, and what too often what we don't discuss is the fact that this is maybe an uncomfortable truth. We behave like brown and black skinned white people in all of these areas, whether it's politics or whether it's education, whether it's economics, whether it's religion, even some of the diets that we glom onto. It's about the way that the diet was created. It was created from the biology of white people. And then we jump onto it and we latch onto it. And then what we do is we get the same results. And it doesn't matter at what point we are whether we are high income, middle income, or low income. We're in each economic strata, we still mostly behave like rugged individuals. We behave like codependent people. We behave like emotional, and we behave like white people with brown and black skin. So in order for these things to change, we have to embrace mobilization. We have to get away from what, as you said, emotionalism. We have to be mobilized and organized, and we also have to become interdependent.
I could go an hour talking about interdependence amongst Black folks. I want to go to the questions from the group. Anthony Sims asked this question. He said, should mobilization of minority voters be herded to local government and state level polls versus our efforts toward presidential votes? George, I'll hit you with that one first.
Herded into what?
The question is basically, should the mobilization of minority voters be herded to local government and state level polls versus our efforts toward presidential votes? And I think you all know my answer to this question.
Yeah, I don't even like the terminology of that question, being herded. I just don't even like that termination because the terminology, because I'm not sure that's what this person is meaning in the question. So I'm not disrespecting the person for the question. I'm just asking for clarity. But it's making me think, okay, who's going to herd, and then where are we being herded to?
I think they just attempted to say, should we focus on getting people out to vote locally versus all the energy we put into presidential elections?
I agree that we should start at the ground level first. It's got to be local. But I'm challenging, I would add the twist to that is that to begin our local system of politics, it has to be independent of the current systems that are out there now.
When you say current systems, are you speaking partisan?
On either side, because we should be leveraging all parties to our demographic interests. So, for example, there is where I am, I reside in Indianapolis, Indiana. There is a big meeting coming up titled the Black Agenda. I was all excited about going until at the end of the flyer, it said, we will take all of our findings to the current mayor and government in our state. To me, that's not a Black agenda. A Black agenda is ours. We don't take our agenda anywhere. Actually, if anything, our stuff is so powerful that they want to come to us. Otherwise, it's not an impactful agenda. All we're doing is that's a wish list of taking to them to say, will you please give us some fair consideration on these things that we as a demographic have asked for? That's not a Black agenda. A Black agenda,
a codependent posture. That's also a codependent posture.
Right.
Mojo, same question. Do you think we should focus our efforts on getting people out to the polls for local and state elections?
Well, I think number one, if you vote for the president, you should have voted for your city commissioner too, and your county commissioner too. So I don't even understand that question at all. Because if you vote, is it when the community comes together as a whole and they build their own community and they're doing their own things, what happens is we are in a capitalist society and we are the biggest customers. Once you are not sucking on the teat, so to speak, then when you take away the customer, we don't need the dealer. You know, a drug dealer without some fiends ain't nothing but an addict. So once we are self-sufficient, we don't have to worry about it. Don't matter to me who the city commissioner is, the county commissioner. If my community is like, you know, is like Rosewood. If my community is Tulsa, if once the more that we do for ourselves without any elected officials, then that makes them care about what we want because we took the customer away from the dealer.
But they still, but every elected official, I can tell you, in their
but they don't do that much for you. They really don't.
But that
they really don't.
But they do. They pass policies all the time. I sat in the community. I sat in communities outside north of Chicago. I sat in communities.
I'm saying we got to vote. We have got to be active. Period. I'm saying that's not a question. We have got to be, because people fought, died, bled for this, even just the right to do this. So even if we feel it doesn't have an impact, you have got to vote locally. You have got to understand what's on the ballot. I used to poll people, and 80% of the things on the ballot, people didn't understand what were on there. They just hit the dot on what's the familiar name.
So
that's why they make them confusing.
So Mojo, the answer to my question, yes. Is it yes?
Yes, it was yes. It was yes. That at the local level, everything needs to be grassroots. You can't start from the top down. You have to start from the bottom up. It has to start in your community, in your county, in your city, in your state, before you even worry about national elections.
Can I add something?
Go ahead, Rock.
Can I add something to what Mojo said?
Go ahead, Rock. Go ahead.
I mean, we've talked about it, but I just want to reiterate in terms of voting locally. Another piece of this puzzle that I think that's missing is we have to organize locally, which includes voting for the organization, whoever is leading or representing that organization, whether you're talking about a tenants organization, a homeowners association, a bike club, a car club. We have to get into the mentality of being part of an organization. Yes. And it may not just be one organization. It could be, ideally, you may be a member of a number of organizations, a parent-teacher association, a homeowners association, a car club, a homeowners association. We have to get into the mentality of that before and consistently. That's more consistent. Being a member of an organized or a number of organized movements is more impactful than just voting locally, because now we're voting as a block. Now, if I'm a member of my car club and I'm a member of my PTA and I'm a member of my homeowners association, now I have 3 different organizations that I can go to and say, hey, we're going to vote for Penny. We, the organizations, the organized movement, we're going to vote for Penny. We're going to present what we want as a Black agenda, or as a homeowners association, or as the Honda Accord Owners Association, we're going to exercise a organized activity towards the local politician.
Couple of things. Number one, homeowners associations are communists. Hey, and where was that? Where was that vote for Penny when I ran for county board in Milwaukee in 2014? I lost by 13 votes. Or the story, or the issue. So we recognize what the issues are, and we all agree that voting locally is key. There's two things I want to talk about before we wrap the show. This has been a good conversation. The first thing is we recognize what the problem is. How do we get people to vote locally? How do we get people? Because there are wards. There was a ward in Los Angeles, in L.A. County, that turned out 98% of its voters in 2008 for Barack Obama. 98%. The local city council race that following the election, I think was 2 years later, 3%. 3%. How do we get people focused away from the presidential election and onto those elections down the ballot? How do we do that? Start with you,
Find your kings.
You said what, Mojo?
I said, find your kings. You know how you said earlier, you said, well, it's rare to find a Barack Obama, but that's good because people like him should be rare. But the thing is, we have so many of our young Black men that we browbeat down, that they would be the next great leader. We have to nurture your kings so that there's always one single person that inspires people. Because everything we're talking about is unity. We're talking about people coming together, and there's always an individual that does that. And it's always going to be a Barack Obama or someone, and it's going to be an extraordinary person. But as long as we keep destroying our young Black men, we're not going to have that many young Black men that have the potential of being that next extraordinary voice in his community. Build your kings up, build your princes up, and then you will find that voice.
But the voice does not. But then there's women in Black space too, and I took a
the queens and they stronger than us. They strong. They stronger than us. And I mean the same thing about it. But seriously, if we don't nurture our seeds, we will not see any plants grow. Nothing that we have will flourish if we do not concentrate on nurturing our children. And our children are under siege. Have no doubt about this. Our children right now under siege. We recognize
that. I was just correcting the fact that you were focusing on the men. I was saying that. Oh no,
I didn't mean it like that. But it just flowed well with what I was saying.
I'm just trying not to catch a browbeat next time I'm on the show and a bunch of women.
We know the queens are strong.
George, how do we get the focus off of all politics are local? We've heard it a million times. How do we take the focus off of DC and put the focus on Main Street? How do we do that, George?
By identifying the key obstacles that are keeping us from consistently voting and being that local. You can't just say what. And my father used to say, "Hey, was that the sign, man? Was that the sign?" You missed it. That was an inside joke. Yeah. My father, you took a swig.
No. I got it. Hey, you're good, man.
My father would tell me, and I'm blessed to have my father still living, and I'm blessed to have the experience of having a father because it's crucial. It goes to a lot to what William just said about nurturing your kings. You know, you got to start your kings early if you're going to nurture them. And having a male role model is one of the key steps. But finding obstacles. So my father used to say, "Don't tell me to be a man. Tell me how to be a man." It's easy to say what to do, but we suffer for lack of
Knowledge.
And so this is a knowledge base. And there's a clinical term that I apply to our behavior in many of our systemic areas, and it's called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is an official clinical definition for, it can apply to any species, but any species that has been subject to prolonged traumatic experiences eventually adopts an attitude of resignation, of nothing I do works, and you just give up. And in many ways, just in the area of voting and politics, that's been a traumatic process. Right. People have fought and died to vote. And when we thought we made gains, they were snatched away. So that prolonged exposure and those failures get generationally passed down to where you find yourself doing things and you don't even know why you're doing this. Just that's the way my mama did it. That's the way her mama did it. That's the way her mama's mom did it. But it's learned helplessness. We learn to just give up because we don't believe that anything we do on our own is going to work. So we might get emotional for a minute and emotionally mobilized and come out and vote in record numbers, but that's not going to be a consistency. So we have to address the obstacles that block our mentality from seeing local politics for the way that we should see it.
Rock, Aya has been charged in Penny's fairy tale world. Aya has been approached by the DNC and the RNC, and they said, you know what, we're going to change our focus. Instead of spending $11 million into the next congressional race, we want to focus it on the local mayoral race. How does Rock get people to not focus on Congressperson Smith and focus on the mayoral candidate of choice? How do you do that, Rock? How do you take the focus away from the national to the local?
Well, I mean, I think part of the reason why that happens is because of the marketing. I mean, there's a great deal of marketing that goes into national politics and not so much into local politics. And we're socialized to react to what we're seeing and hearing on TV over and over and over again. So and that's again not to beat a dead horse, but that's another reason why local organized movements matter, because through that network of local organizations, you don't have to rely so much on what you're hearing on TV and on radio. You're hearing it constantly through the local network of organized movements and mobilized movements. So it kind of competes with the radio and the information that you're being bombarded with from national media gets to compete with the information you're being bombarded with from the meetings that you're going to and the meetings that you're participating in. So that's what Aya would do. Aya, first of all, we're in the community collaborating with other organizations and helping to make sure that Penny or George or whoever the local politician is being heard, that his voice is being heard through the local network of Aya members, the local network of, and I said that even though you say it's communist, but let me just use it as an example, through the network of not only my homeowners association, but through the district's home association coalition. You see what I'm saying? So we're not just talking about that one organization, but we're also talking about the coalition of organizations. And then that gets to be, it provides a little bit of balance. The coalition of unions, the coalition of stewards, the coalition of homeowners associations and tenant associations, and the coalition of Aya members and things like that. Then now you're hearing about this person. Oh, okay. All right. So Penny is okay, and he's going to be at the meeting, and then he's going to be at the next meeting. I think that's a start. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely answered my question.
Because I worked in radio for 10 years, so I understand that there's a tremendous power to advertising and marketing, especially when it comes to national politics or whatever. Anything that is national is generally designed to get more attention to anything that's going on locally. But if we have stronger local networks, then those local networks market effectively to compete with what's going on nationally. That national noise gets balanced out. And I would invite people, if you're not a member of AYA, you need to join AYA or join some organization in your city or join one of our chapters. And if you're not a member of one of our chapters, then create a chapter in your city.
Last question, and I was going to ask you, but I asked you offline the question. I have some questions about AYA, but I asked you those offline. Last question tonight, gentlemen, as we wrap up this great conversation, we're going to keep just the last little brief question because it's going to lead me into our next political discussion when we have our next political show. I want to dig a little deeper on the next show into political parties. A good friend of mine, a man named Frederick Alexander Mead, I met him many years ago on the radio. When I used to be on the radio, local radio in Milwaukee a lot, he brought up a very good point that I liked. And I want to just get a quick response from you guys. He said that the Black masses need to start a political party, a third political party, one that is created by Black people, but open to anybody. So my last question tonight, do you agree that we need to start a third party? Or do you believe that there's a particular party that we should gravitate toward or stay in our current position? Rock, I'm gonna start with you and work our way back to the group.
Okay, well, yeah, as a representative of AYA, we are definitely advocates of breaking up the political duopoly, and we're also advocates of alternative parties, whether it's a third or fourth party or fifth party. Absolutely, yes, I believe in that. I support efforts for that. I support people who are green, who are socialist this, socialist that. I'm definitely an advocate of alternative parties.
Mojo, same question. Black Party?
I firmly believe in it and have espoused it for a long time. And I mean, and actually in the history of this country, the majority of the history of this country was more than two parties. There were 6 parties through the first, 65 years of this country, and that's how our entire system is designed to have multiple parties. It was never designed to have 2. And so, and no one is going to hear your voice. Unity is your voice. And if our voice is so combined in our needs, then yes, but there should be, even if it's not just a Black party, there should be at least 4 parties.
Agreed. George, the last word is yours.
I would submit to you that we already have a party. It's just not organized. But the way that I would call the organized version of who we are, once we decide to make that conscious intention, is we would call ourselves the Power Party.
I'm down with that.
The Power Party would transcend all other partisan systems.
Power to the people.
And then, to borrow a words of wisdom from a very accomplished athlete, Michael Jordan, the way we play the game, he had his best game when he followed this. Let the game come to you. That's a total different paradigm, because that puts you in power. People that are in power, they don't walk fast. They don't say a whole lot of words. You hardly know they're in the room. But yet everybody is attracted to them. And that's the mindset that we need to take. I submit that once we consciously decide to do this, we call it the Power Party.
I agree.
And one last note on that before I close. Someone said, Nate said, in regards to political parties for Blacks, we should have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, which means we're more concerned about self-interests. I knew,
Yep.
I knew Mojo would like that one. But listen, you guys, it has been a great show. George, Mojo, Rock, I appreciate you guys coming on and having a good discussion about politics. I look forward to further discussion offline. Listen, and Black Space viewers, thank you guys for joining us. Be tuned to tune in on Tuesday for more Black Space Live. Same bat channel, same bat time. I've been your host, Penny Finley, and I've enjoyed you guys. You guys have a good night.
Thank you, Penny.
Good night.
Good night,
All
man.
right.